Hello, Dream Room friends. Before you throw another fallen branch into the trash or burn pile, look at it one more time. That crooked piece of wood may already be a plant trellis, a lantern frame, a garden hook, or even part of a natural privacy screen. And the best part is that most of these projects can be made with materials you already have. If you have a narrow backyard, a 6 by 8 foot patio, a small balcony, a rented deck, or just a few pots beside the front door, these ideas are for you. You do not need a workshop. You do not need expensive power tools. And you certainly do not need to lift heavy lumber or build complicated structures. For most of the projects in this video, a pair of garden pruners, some jute twine, sandpaper, scissors, and perhaps a small drill are enough. That matters if you enjoy decorating, but your hands are not as strong as they once were. It also matters if you live in an apartment, have limited storage, or simply prefer projects you can finish in one relaxed afternoon. I have worked with gardens and small living spaces for years, and one lesson keeps coming back. The most beautiful spaces are rarely the ones with the most expensive objects. They are the ones where every object feels like it belongs. A weathered branch already has texture, color, curves, knots, and small imperfections that factory-made decor tries to imitate. You do not have to make it look rustic. It already is. In this video, we are going to turn ordinary fallen wood into 8 practical and decorative projects. We will start with a simple branch tool rail that gets gloves and hand tools off the ground. Then we will build natural supports for climbing plants, warm jar lanterns for evening seating areas, a seasonal wreath, a compact bug hotel, and finally, a living branch screen that can soften an ugly wall or create privacy without closing in a small patio. And there is one design trick I want you to notice as we go. We will not force every branch into a perfect shape. We will let the natural curve of the wood decide what it wants to become. That single idea can make these projects easier, cheaper, and much more beautiful. So take a look around your yard before buying anything new. The material for your next garden feature may already be lying under a tree. And if you enjoy simple decorating ideas for small homes, patios, balconies, bedrooms, home offices, and gardens, subscribe to Dream Room. We share practical ways to create warmer, calmer spaces without needing a huge budget or complicated construction. Now, let us start with the branch shape that most people overlook and turn it into one of the most useful pieces in the garden. 1. Rustic branch tool rail, natural hooks that actually save space. The first idea solves a problem almost every small garden has: too many little tools and nowhere convenient to put them. Instead of buying another plastic organizer, look for branches with a natural fork. Those Y-shaped pieces are perfect because the branch has already done most of the design work for you. Choose pieces about 6 to 10 inches long with a main stem at least 1 inch thick. Freshly fallen hardwood such as oak, maple, or fruit tree branches usually works better than soft, crumbly wood. Trim away weak side shoots, then lightly sand the cut ends and any sharp spots that could catch your gloves or sleeves. Do not remove every bit of bark. The cracks, knots, and uneven surface are what make the finished rail feel like it belongs in a garden rather than in a hardware aisle. Next, find a reclaimed board about 24 to 36 inches long. An old fence board, pallet slat, or leftover shelf works well. Attach 3 to 5 forked branches along the board, spacing them roughly 5 to 7 inches apart. For a stronger hold, drive screws through the back of the board into the thickest part of each branch. Now you have natural hooks. Use them for lightweight hand tools, gardening gloves, pruning shears, a sun hat, plant ties, or a small watering nozzle. If your patio is only 6 by 8 feet, this kind of vertical storage matters. Every item you lift off the floor gives you more room for a chair, another container plant, or simply a clearer walking path. Here is a design trick I often use. Do not make every hook identical. Put one longer branch near the end for a hat or small basket. Use shorter hooks in the middle for gloves and hand tools. That variation makes the rail look more like rustic wall art. Mount it near your patio door, potting bench, or sheltered fence where you naturally reach for tools. If bending down has become uncomfortable, Place the rail around waist to chest height. You will notice the difference immediately. For renters, there is an even simpler version. Screw the hooks to a narrow board, then lean or hang the entire board from removable outdoor-rated hardware instead of drilling several holes into the wall. One discarded branch becomes storage. 5 branches can clean up an entire gardening corner. And once your tools are off the floor, we can use the next group of straight twigs for something completely different, helping a container plant grow upward instead of outward. 2. Mini branch ladder. Give container plants more height. If your patio or balcony is small, the easiest way to make it feel richer is to grow upward instead of spreading everything across the floor. That is exactly what this next project does. Take 2 fairly straight branches about 18 to 30 inches long. These will become the sides of a miniature ladder. Then cut 4 or 5 shorter twigs for the rungs. Each one can be around 5 to 8 inches wide, depending on the size of your planter. The pieces do not need to match perfectly. In fact, slightly uneven branches usually look better beside terracotta, stone, herbs, and trailing plants, because they keep the arrangement natural. Lay the 2 long branches parallel on a table or flat surface. Position the shorter rungs between them, leaving roughly 4 to 6 inches between each step. For the simplest version, tie every joint tightly with jute twine. If you want the ladder to last longer outdoors, you can secure each rung with a small screw and wrap twine over the joint afterward. That gives you strength without losing the handmade appearance. Now place the bottom several inches into a large container and lean the ladder slightly backward. This small angle is important. It keeps the structure stable while allowing leaves to fall naturally toward the front, where you can actually see them. Try it with ivy, nasturtium, sweet pea, or another lightweight climbing plant. As the stems grow, gently guide them around the rungs instead of forcing them into position. Within a few weeks, the ladder begins to disappear beneath the foliage. For anyone working with a balcony, rented deck, or narrow patio, this is an especially useful trick. One pot can now give you height without taking up another square foot of floor space. You can also make the container look more layered by using 3 levels of planting. Put the climbing plant toward the back. Add a compact plant around the middle. Then use 1 trailing plant near the edge so the foliage spills over the rim. Suddenly, 1 ordinary pot has a top, middle, and lower layer. And resist the urge to cut both ladder sides perfectly even. A slightly taller branch on one side gives the piece more character and makes it feel as though it grew into the space rather than came from a factory. This is one of those small details that costs almost nothing but changes the entire look of a container garden. Next, we will use an even simpler arrangement of twigs to create a fan-shaped support that can guide climbing plants upward with almost no construction at all. Sura, fan-shaped twig trellis, a simple support for climbing plants. For the third idea, you only need a handful of straight twigs and 1 container. Gather 5 to 7 slender branches that are long enough to rise well above the pot. They do not need to be perfectly straight, but avoid pieces that are brittle, cracked, or too weak to support new growth. Place the branches together at the bottom and tie them tightly with jute twine. Then spread the upper ends outward into a fan shape. That simple movement changes a bundle of sticks into a natural plant support. Push the tied base several inches into the soil, close to the back or center of the container. Make sure it feels stable before guiding any stems onto it. A useful detail is to make the center branch slightly taller than the others. This creates a gentle peak in the middle, helping the entire arrangement look taller and more balanced instead of flat across the top. Once the trellis is in place, guide young climbing stems toward the nearest twig. Do not pull or twist them too tightly. Let the plant find its way around the branches as it grows. Over time, the leaves and stems begin to cover the structure, and the wood gradually blends into the planting. That is one of the advantages of using natural branches. A plastic or metal support often remains visually obvious. A twig trellis slowly disappears into the foliage. This works well with decorative vines, peas, small flowering climbers, or lightweight vegetables. For a small balcony or patio, make a compact version that fits inside a single container. For a larger garden bed, simply use longer branches and widen the fan. The same idea can also sit against a fence if you want the plant to climb upward without adding a bulky manufactured frame. And do not worry if every twig has a different knot, bend, or patch of bark. Those differences are part of the design. The rough texture of the wood contrasts beautifully with soft green leaves, and the uneven lines make the support feel relaxed and handmade. For viewers who want a simple project without complicated cutting or measuring, this is one of the easiest ways to add height and structure to a small planting area. You are using the shape the branch already has instead of forcing it into something perfect. And in the next section, we will take those same simple twigs and use them for a completely different purpose, turning an ordinary glass jar into warm evening light. SAR, twig-wrapped jar lanterns, warm evening light for almost no money. This fourth idea is one of the easiest ways to make a small patio feel warmer after sunset. Instead of buying outdoor lanterns, start with an ordinary glass jar. Choose several thin branches and cut them to roughly the same height as the jar. They do not need to be perfectly straight or identical in thickness. Place the twigs vertically around the outside of the glass, one beside another, leaving narrow gaps between them. Then secure the branches with jute twine or discrete wire. That is all the structure you need. Once everything is secure, place a battery-operated LED candle inside the jar. As evening arrives, the light begins to escape through the spaces between the branches. Those narrow openings cast soft striped shadows onto nearby stones, leaves, pots, and paving. The effect is simple, but it can completely change the feeling of a small outdoor corner. Instead of using only one lantern, make 3. Vary their heights slightly and group them beside a chair, garden bench, or small outdoor table. This is an important decorating trick. Repeating the same handmade object 3 times makes the arrangement look intentional rather than accidental. Even when the materials cost almost nothing, the result can feel carefully styled. For a narrow patio, place the lanterns close together in one corner instead of spreading them across the entire space. On a balcony, they can sit beside a group of container plants without taking up much room. They are also useful for anyone who likes to rearrange the garden frequently, because each lantern is lightweight and easy to move. You do not need wiring. You do not need to run an extension cord across the floor. And there is no permanent fixture to install. For older viewers or anyone who prefers simpler projects, that makes this one especially practical. A battery-operated LED candle is also a better choice when an open flame would be unsafe or inconvenient, particularly around dry leaves, timber decking, children, or pets. The branches themselves provide enough texture, so there is no need to paint or heavily decorate the jars. Let the bark, knots, and small differences in each twig remain visible. During the day, they look like rustic garden objects. At night, they become soft pools of light. And if you like this woodland atmosphere, the next project takes the same idea one step further by lifting the light off the ground with 3 simple branches. Woodland tripod lantern. Create a tiny outdoor retreat. For the 5th idea, we are going to turn 3 simple branches into a small lighting feature that feels surprisingly calm and inviting. Choose 3 relatively straight branches of similar length. They do not need to match perfectly, but they should be sturdy enough to stand without bending. Place the 3 pieces together and tie them securely near the top with jute twine. Then spread the bottoms apart to form a stable tripod. Once the structure is standing firmly, suspend a lightweight jar lantern or small battery-powered lamp from the center. The result is simple, but visually, it changes the mood immediately. Place the tripod beside your favorite chair, near a reading corner, among a group of container plants, or in a sheltered section of the patio. 3 ordinary branches can suddenly make the space feel like a tiny woodland camp. For someone with a small backyard, balcony, rented deck, or narrow patio, this works especially well because the structure does not need to be attached permanently to a wall or fence. You can move it whenever your seating arrangement changes. If you want a softer glow, loosely wrap a short strand of battery-powered microlights around 1 or 2 of the tripod legs. Keep the lighting subtle. The goal is not to cover the wood completely, but to let the warm light highlight the natural bark and shape of the branches. This is also why you should avoid sanding the wood until it looks new. Weathered bark, small cracks, faded areas, and natural knots help the lantern feel more authentic. When the light reflects across those uneven surfaces after sunset, the texture becomes part of the decoration. The tripod can sit beside a single chair and create a quiet evening corner without adding another table or large piece of furniture. That matters in a compact space. It also makes the project practical for renters or anyone who prefers decorations that can be moved, stored, and rearranged without construction. During the day, it looks like a simple woodland sculpture. At night, the suspended light turns the same 3 branches into a warm focal point. And after creating 2 lighting projects, we will move back to decoration in the next section with something you can hang on a gate, fence, or wall and change throughout the entire year. Seasonal twig wreath. 1 base, 4 different looks. For the 6th idea, we are using thin, flexible branches to create something that can stay in your garden all year. Start by gathering several slender twigs that can bend without snapping. Shape them gently into a loose circle or oval, then overlap the ends and tie the sections together with jute twine. Do not worry about making the wreath perfectly round. In fact, a slightly uneven shape usually looks better in a natural garden because it feels handmade rather than manufactured. Once the basic frame is secure, you can decorate it differently as the seasons change. In spring, add a few dried blossoms or delicate green cuttings. During summer, weave in herbs and grasses. In autumn, use seed heads, berries, or colorful leaves. And in winter, add evergreen pieces and pine cones. The important idea is that you only need to build the twig base once. Instead of making a completely new wreath every few months, simply remove the old decorations and replace them with whatever suits the season. That makes this project especially useful for anyone who enjoys changing the look of a small space without buying new decor each time. Hang the wreath on a garden gate, shed door, timber fence, porch wall, or balcony partition. Even a very small entrance can feel more welcoming when one handmade object marks the transition from the house into the garden. For a narrow patio or rented balcony, this is also a good way to decorate vertically. It adds texture and character without taking up any floor space. Keep the decorations simple. If you cover every branch, you lose the beauty of the wood itself. Let some of the bark remain visible, along with the knots, small bends, and natural differences between the twigs. Those imperfections are what give the wreath its woodland character. A single base can therefore give you 4 different looks throughout the year. Spring feels lighter, summer feels fresh, autumn becomes richer, winter feels warm and rustic. And because the structure is lightweight, you can move it easily from one location to another whenever you rearrange your patio, porch, or garden. This is a small project, but it has a strong decorating effect because it changes with the seasons instead of becoming something you stop noticing. In the next section, we will take natural materials in a different direction and create a compact feature that is not only decorative, but can also add more life to the garden. 7. Compact bug hotel, decoration that also adds life to the garden. The 7th idea is different because it is not only decorative, it can also add a little more life and purpose to a small garden. Start with a reclaimed wooden box, a shallow frame, or a simple block structure that is compact enough to hang on a fence, patio wall, or balcony partition. Then fill the open sections with dry natural materials. Use hollow plant stems, short twigs, pieces of bark, untreated wood, and other small materials collected from the garden. Pack everything firmly. The pieces should fit tightly enough that they do not fall out when the structure is moved or exposed to wind. Even before any insects arrive, the combination of bark, stems, wood, and small cavities creates a strong, natural texture. That is what makes this project work as decoration. Instead of hiding it behind a shed, place it where it can become part of the garden display. A good location is near flowering plants. For a small patio or balcony, you can surround the bug hotel with a few containers of herbs and compact flowers. This creates a miniature wildlife corner without taking over the entire space. The structure itself does not need to be large. In fact, a smaller version is often easier to integrate into a narrow backyard, container garden, or rented outdoor area. The important thing is to keep the materials dry, secure, and suitable for the beneficial insects found in your local area. Not every bug hotel needs to look the same, and not every material is appropriate everywhere. That is why it is better to think of this as a simple garden feature that can be adapted to local conditions rather than a fixed formula. Visually, the rough wood also works beautifully beside leaves and flowers. The straight edges of the frame give the project structure, while the irregular stems, bark, and twigs soften it. For anyone who prefers garden decoration to have a practical purpose, this idea is especially satisfying. It does more than fill an empty wall. It makes the space feel active, natural, and connected to the garden around it. And because it uses small leftover materials, it is also a good way to use pieces that are too short or irregular for the larger branch projects. Now we are ready for the final idea. This one uses tall branches on a much bigger scale to create privacy, support climbing plants, and completely change the feeling of a small outdoor corner. So, Patio, living branch privacy screen, the biggest transformation. The eighth idea is the largest project in this collection, but it can also create the strongest visual change. Instead of using branches as small decoration, we are going to use them as structure. Collect several tall, fairly straight branches. They do not need to be identical, but choose pieces that are sturdy enough to stand upright without bending too easily. Position them vertically inside a large planter or along the edge of a narrow garden bed. Then connect them with a few horizontal twigs, jute twine, or discrete garden wire. Keep the spacing slightly irregular. You are not trying to build a solid wall. The goal is to create a light, open screen that gives you some privacy while still allowing sunlight and air to pass through. This matters in a small patio. A completely solid barrier can make a compact space feel even smaller, especially if the seating area is already close to a fence or wall. A branch screen is different. It creates separation without closing the space in. Use it to soften an unattractive wall, partially hide bins or utility equipment, or create a more private corner around a chair and small table. If you want to add greenery, guide lightweight climbing plants through the branches as they grow. Over time, the wood begins to disappear behind leaves and stems, turning the structure into a living screen. There is one design detail worth keeping. Do not cut every branch to exactly the same height. Instead, let the heights rise and fall gradually across the top. That uneven line feels more natural, almost like the edge of a small woodland, and it prevents the screen from looking too rigid. For viewers with a balcony, rented deck, or narrow backyard, this project can also be useful because it does not require permanent fencing. If the branches are secured inside a large container, the entire feature can remain movable. You can reposition it when the seating area changes or remove it later without rebuilding the garden. And this is what makes the project so effective. One simple structure can do several jobs at once. It provides partial privacy. It supports climbing plants. It hides things you would rather not look at. And at the same time, it becomes a natural sculpture made from materials that might otherwise have been discarded. From one pile of fallen branches, you can create storage, plant support, lighting, seasonal decoration, habitat, and now an entire garden screen. That brings us to the final idea behind all 8 projects. Sometimes the best way to improve a small space is not to add more things, but to see more potential in what is already there. Conclusion: simple branches, small spaces, beautiful results. A fallen branch may look like garden waste at first, but after these 8 projects, you can probably see it differently. A forked branch can become a useful tool hook. Straight twigs can support climbing plants. Smaller pieces can surround a lantern. Flexible stems can become seasonal decoration, and taller branches can even create privacy in a compact patio. That is the real value of working with natural materials. You do not need a large backyard, a woodworking shop, or an expensive collection of tools. Even if you have only a balcony, a rented deck, a narrow garden path, or a few containers beside your home, you can still create something personal and beautiful. And remember one simple rule: do not fight the natural shape of the wood. A bend may become the perfect hook, a fork may become part of a trellis, a weathered crack or patch of bark may be exactly what gives the finished project character. Start small. Choose one branch, one container, or one empty corner that needs improvement. You may be surprised by how much warmer the space feels when you add something made by hand from materials already around you. Good decorating is not always about buying more. Sometimes it is about noticing more. Now, I would love to know which project you would try first: the branch tool rail, mini plant ladder, twig lantern, seasonal wreath, bug hotel, or living privacy screen. Tell us in the comments below. And if you have already created something from fallen branches, share your idea too. It may inspire another dream room viewer. If you enjoy practical ideas for decorating small homes, patios, balconies, bedrooms, home offices, and gardens with simple, affordable materials, subscribe to Dream Room and follow the channel for more creative projects. Until next time, keep looking at ordinary materials with fresh eyes. Your next beautiful garden feature may already be lying under a tree.